Imagine it's the middle of the night in a small village in Iraq. A man is hiding underground. He's been hiding for 249 days. He is the most wanted man on Earth. A $25 million bounty on his head. Every intelligence agency in the world searching for him. Satellite surveillance, informants, raids on hundreds of locations. And right now, at this very moment, he's 6 feet underground in a hole barely wide enough to lie down in, listening as 600 American soldiers sweep through the village above him. In his pocket, $750,000 in cash, a loaded pistol. He knows they're coming. He can hear the boots, the shouting, the helicopters, and in about 3 minutes, the man who ruled Iraq for 24 years will be pulled from that hole, and the world will never see him the same way again. But here's what nobody tells you about that moment. It almost didn't happen. March 19th, 2003. The United States launches an invasion of Iraq with a coalition of forces from over 40 countries, the stated reason.
Weapons of mass destruction, very seriously.
Saddam Hussein possesses weapons of mass destruction that threaten global security. The Iraqi military, once considered the 4th largest in the world, crumbles in weeks. April 9th, 2003, Baghdad falls. In Firdos Square, that famous statue of Saddam comes crashing down in front of the world's cameras. But Saddam himself? Gone. He'd been seen on television on April 9th, walking through Baghdad neighborhoods, greeting supporters. Then, he vanished. Some thought he'd fled to Syria. Others believed he was dead, killed in one of the bombing raids on his palaces. But US intelligence had a different theory. They believed Saddam was still in Iraq, still alive, and based on intercepted communications, he was moving constantly, never staying in one location for more than 4 hours, a ghost in his own country. The manhunt that followed became the largest in modern military history. Every palace, every safe house, every suspected hideout, hundreds of raids, thousands of interrogations. Nothing. And then in July, 4 months into the search, the Americans got their first real win, but it would turn out to be a dead end in disguise. A man walks into a US base in Mosul. He's nervous, scared, but he has information worth $30 million. He tells the Americans that Saddam's 2 sons, Uday and Qusay Hussein, are hiding in a mansion in the city. He'll tell them exactly where, but he wants the reward money and safe passage out of Iraq. The Americans don't hesitate. July 22nd, 2003. Special forces surround the mansion. What happens next becomes a 4-hour firefight. The brothers refuse to surrender. They're armed with AK-47's grenades, and they're not going quietly. The Americans try tear gas. The brothers keep firing. Finally, they call in TOW missiles, anti-tank weapons, and level most of the building. When the shooting finally stops and soldiers enter what's left of the mansion, both brothers are dead. Uday, 39 years old, Qusay, 37. The informant gets his $30 million and is relocated to America. For the US military, it's a massive victory. 2 of the most wanted men in Iraq taken out in one operation. The bounty system works. More informants will come forward now, except they don't. Because here's what nobody understood at the time. Uday and Qusay were brutal, violent, feared, but they weren't part of Saddam's inner circle anymore. By 2003, Saddam didn't trust them with his location. He didn't trust them with anything. The death of his sons didn't bring the Americans any closer to Saddam. If anything, it made him more paranoid, more careful, more invisible. The US military has a list, 52 names, the most wanted Iraqi playing cards, each card featuring a high-ranking member of Saddam's regime, ministers, generals, Ba'ath Party officials, Saddam's inner circle of power. And one by one, these men are being captured, interrogated, squeezed for information about where Saddam might be hiding. But every single one of them gives the same answer: I don't know. And here's the thing, they're telling the truth. See, when Saddam was in power, these men mattered. They ran ministries, commanded armies, made decisions, but their authority came from Saddam. When the regime collapsed, so did their power. Now Saddam's on the run. He doesn't need a foreign minister. He doesn't need a defense minister. He needs people who can keep him alive. People who know how to disappear. People he's trusted since before he ever had power. And while hundreds of US soldiers are kicking down doors looking for government officials in Baghdad, one interrogator in Tikrit is starting to figure that out. His name is Staff Sergeant Eric Maddox. He's 28 years old, an interrogator with the 525th Military Intelligence Brigade, and he's conducted over 300 interrogations since the invasion began. Saddam's personal security operated in 3 concentric rings. The outer ring, regular security forces assigned to palaces, government buildings, fixed locations. If you saw Saddam at a public event, these were the guys in the background. The middle ring, advanced security teams that traveled ahead of Saddam to sweep and secure locations. They made sure the route was clear, the building was safe, the perimeter was locked down. The inner ring, the Himayah, the protectors. These weren't soldiers, they weren't hired guns, they were men Saddam had known since childhood, men from his hometown of Tikrit, men whose families had been loyal to his family for generations. There were never more than 15 of them at any given time. They slept in the same buildings as Saddam. They were with him 24/7. Maddox starts focusing on Tikrit, Saddam's hometown, about 100 miles north of Baghdad. Most of the Himayah came from 5 specific families in Tikrit, families Saddam had known since he was a child, families who owed everything to him. And one family name keeps appearing in Maddox's interrogations: Al-Muslit. The Al-Muslit family had provided bodyguards to Saddam for over 30 years. And the head of that family, the one Maddox keeps hearing about, is a man named Mohammed Ibrahim Omar al-Muslit, 50 years old, former Himayah, one of Saddam's most trusted protectors. And according to the intelligence Maddox is gathering, Mohammed Ibrahim isn't just protecting Saddam anymore, he's running the entire insurgency. Finding Mohammed Ibrahim becomes Maddox's obsession. But Ibrahim is careful. He never uses phones, never stays in one place, never follows a pattern. So Maddox starts with the outer edges of Ibrahim's network. October 2003, Maddox interrogates a low-level insurgent who mentions his cousin works for someone important. That cousin is arrested. Under interrogation, he gives up a name, Basim Latif, Mohammed Ibrahim's driver. November 2003, Basim is captured during a raid on a safe house in Tikrit. Basim won't talk about Mohammed Ibrahim directly, but he mentions 2 businessmen who sometimes traveled with Ibrahim. Their names go on the list. Family members of those businessmen are brought in for questioning. One of them mentions that Ibrahim has a son named Muslid. December 1st, 2003. Muslid is captured at a checkpoint outside Samarra. Maddox sits down with him, and at first, it seems like a dead end. Muslid isn't part of the insurgency. He doesn't know where his father is. He hasn't seen Saddam in years. But then, almost as an afterthought, Muslid says something. My father and I used to go fishing together when I was young. We don't anymore, but I know he still fishes. He owns a pond near Samarra. He goes there to relax. To anyone else, that would mean nothing. A trivial detail. A son reminiscing about time with his father. But Maddox remembers something from months earlier. Back in June, he'd interrogated one of Saddam's former housekeepers. The woman had worked in one of his palaces before the war. And during the interrogation, she'd mentioned, almost in passing, that Saddam loved maskuf, a traditional Iraqi dish of grilled carp, fresh fish, grilled over an open fire, Saddam's favorite meal. And suddenly, Maddox sees it. Mohammed Ibrahim owns a fish farm. Saddam loves fresh fish. If Ibrahim is protecting Saddam, he needs to feed him. The fish farm isn't just a business. It's a supply line. December 8th, 2003, 3 a.m. US forces raid Mohammed Ibrahim's fish farm outside Samarra. They find 2 men, fishermen who work the ponds. Neither of them is Mohammed Ibrahim. But during the interrogation, one of them, a 9-year-old kid, starts talking. He mentions a cousin. The cousin is a lieutenant in the resistance. The kid doesn't know much about what his cousin does, but he knows the cousin has been spending time at an uncle's house in Baghdad recently. Baghdad. Think about that for a second. The trail Maddox is following goes like this. A bodyguard's son mentioned a fish farm, which led to 2 fishermen, one of whom has a cousin in the resistance, whose uncle has a house in Baghdad. It's not even a thread anymore. It's barely a rumor of a thread, but it's all Maddox has. December 12th, 2003. Just after midnight, special forces surround an apartment building in central Baghdad. 2nd floor, end of the hall. They breach the door. Inside the apartment, 3 men. They reach for weapons. There's a brief struggle, and when the dust settles and the lights come on, the soldiers realize who they've just captured. Mohammed Ibrahim, Omar al-Muslit, the man who'd been invisible for 9 months. The man running the insurgency, Saddam's protector. After 8 months of following whispers and half-truths and connections so thin they barely existed, they have him. Maddox sits across from Mohammed Ibrahim. This is it. Everything has led to this moment. But Maddox knows he has to be careful. Maddox sits across from Mohammed Ibrahim. This is it. Everything has led to this moment. But Maddox knows he has to be careful. Ibrahim is Himayah. He's been trained to resist interrogation. He's been loyal to Saddam for over 30 years. You don't break that kind of loyalty with threats. So Maddox makes an offer. Tell me where he is, and I will personally guarantee the safety of you and your entire family. You'll be protected, relocated if necessary. But you have to tell me now, because if we don't move tonight, he'll know you've been captured, and he'll disappear again. Ibrahim sits in silence for what feels like an eternity. And then, finally, he speaks. Ad-Dor, a small farming village, just south of Tikri, about 10 miles from where Saddam was born. There are 2 farmhouses, east of the Tigris River. He moves between them. And then Ibrahim says something that changes everything. We have to go now. Right now. If we wait, someone will warn him and he'll run. Operation Red Dawn launches with 600 soldiers, multiple helicopters, armored vehicles, and 1 prisoner, Mohammed Ibrahim, handcuffed in the back of a Humvee, being taken to the village where he's hidden Saddam Hussein for the last 8 months. Ad-Dor is tiny, maybe 5,000 people, farmland, mud brick houses, date palm orchards along the Tigris. The soldiers arrive fast and loud, no stealth, no subtlety. They want to lock down the entire area before anyone can slip away. Target: 2 farmhouses, code named Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2. Wolverine 1 is searched top to bottom, rooms, closets, underbeds, nothing. Wolverine 2, same thing, empty. And now the soldiers are starting to think, this is another dead end, another bad lead, another wasted night. Mohammed Ibrahim is in the Humvee, watching. He can see the frustration on their faces. He can feel the operation about to be called off. And he knows, if they leave now, Saddam will disappear forever. So, Ibrahim does something unexpected. He points to a small structure about 50 yards north of the 2nd farmhouse. It's barely a building, more like a shack. Mud brick walls, corrugated metal roof, 2 small rooms. Soldiers move toward it, kick in the door. Nothing, just farming tools, some old blankets. They're about to leave, and Ibrahim, surrounded by American soldiers, does something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He can't bring himself to say the words. He can't point and say he's right there, because that would be betrayal. That would mean he gave up Saddam directly. So instead, he looks down at the ground, and he kicks at a piece of rope sticking up from the dirt. One of the soldiers sees it, walks over, pulls on the rope, and underneath a piece of styrofoam and a thin layer of dirt, a trapdoor, the spider hole. It's not a bunker, it's not a sophisticated hideout. It's a hole in the ground, 6 feet deep, barely wide enough for a grown man to lie down in. A soldier pulls out a grenade, ready to drop it in, and then 2 hands appear, reaching up, from the darkness, followed by a face, bearded, unkempt, covered in dirt. The man squints in the flashlight beam and raises his hands higher, and in accented English, he says, "I am Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq, and I want to negotiate." Inside the hole with Saddam, one pistol, loaded, never fired, $750,000, two AK-47 rifles, a white and orange taxi parked nearby, covered with a tarp, a small fan and ventilation pipe. That's it. That's what the ruler of Iraq for 24 years had been reduced to. This was a man who'd built dozens of palaces across Iraq, who'd had golden toilets and parade uniforms covered in medals, who'd commissioned hundreds of statues of himself, who'd killed hundreds of thousands of people, and he was found in a hole in the ground, too scared to even use the gun in his hand. The soldiers pull him out, search him. He doesn't resist. His first words as they handcuff him, "I am willing to negotiate." And the soldiers' response, President Bush sends his regards. December 14th, 2003, 3:15 p.m. Baghdad. L. Paul Bremer, the head of the Coalition Provisional Authority, steps up to a podium in front of the world's media.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
In Baghdad, Iraqis pour into the streets. Some are celebrating, some are firing guns in the air, others are crying, not from joy, but from relief, or maybe trauma, or maybe they're just processing 24 years of horror finally coming to an end. The US military releases footage of Saddam's medical examination, a doctor checking his teeth, his hair being searched for lice. It's humiliating, and that's the point. For decades, Saddam built himself into a mythic figure, the strongman, the survivor, the man who couldn't be touched. And now the world is watching him get his teeth checked like a prisoner of war. But here's what they don't show you in that footage. Saddam knew exactly what was happening. He understood the power of imagery. He'd built his entire rule on it. And as he sat there, being examined, being filmed, being reduced, he said one thing to the American doctor: "You can do what you want with me, but you should remember, I am still the president of Iraq." Even in the spider hole, even in handcuffs, even with his myth shattered, he refused to let go of the story. Saddam Hussein would stand trial for crimes against humanity. He'd be found guilty, and on December 30th, 2006, exactly 3 years after his capture, he'd be executed by hanging. But the capture itself, that moment of him emerging from the spider hole, became something different. It became a meme, a punchline. People joked about finding Saddam hiding in random places, in video games, in diagrams, in Wikipedia edits. That spider hole wasn't the end of anything. The war in Iraq would continue for another 8 years. Over 4,000 American soldiers would die. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians would be killed. The country would be torn apart by sectarian violence. And those weapons of mass destruction, the reason given for the entire invasion, they were never found because they never existed. The United States went to war based on faulty intelligence, political pressure, and perhaps a desire to finish what the first Gulf War had started. And when Saddam was finally captured, when that massive military operation finally succeeded, what changed? The insurgency continued, the violence escalated, Iraq descended into civil war. Because removing one man from power doesn't undo decades of dictatorship. It doesn't rebuild a destroyed country. It doesn't heal the trauma of war. Today, you can visit the site where Saddam was captured. It's been turned into a memorial. The farmhouse, still there. The spider hole has been reconstructed for tourists. Guides will tell you the story, how the most wanted man on earth was found hiding underground, clutching cash and weapons he was too afraid to use. And what they might not tell you is this: the man who found him, Staff Sergeant Eric Maddox, was awarded the Legion of Merit. Muhammad Ibrahim, who kicked at that rope in the dirt, spent years in prison before being quietly released. The farmer who owned the land, who dug that hole, was imprisoned at Abu Ghraib. And the US military turned Saddam's capture into a propaganda victory, just as carefully crafted as any propaganda Saddam himself had created during his 24 years in power.